This is it, folks. This week, Wonder Woman finally hits the big screen. I can finally stop doing videos about her and go back to doing videos about how screwy Marvel has been. And what better time than the release of the Wonder Woman movie to do a video that some of you guys have been asking me to do for quite a while. My list of the top 5 most underrated Wonder Woman comics. I've done one for Batman and one for Superman, but it's taken me a while to do one on the third member of DC's Trinity for 2 reasons. For one, I'm lazy. For 2, for a variety of reasons, Wonder Woman just doesn't have the same amount of readily available graphic novels and trades as her contemporaries do. Green Lantern and The Flash have more readily available trades than Wonder Woman does, and they're actually considered B-level characters. This sort of makes my job of recommending underrated comics hard because chances are they're comics you've already heard about. I have the Gorgon, Gods and Mortals, the Azrael Chang New 52 run, but that doesn't mean there doesn't exist either lost or forgotten Wonder Woman stories that you should check out. And here they are, the top 5 underrated Wonder Woman comics. I generally have 2 rules when it comes to doing these underrated comics videos. 1, it has to be a part of the character's ongoing solo series. In the case of Wonder Woman, that pretty much just leaves her self-titled series. A character like Batman sometimes has multiple titles a month, Batman, Detective Comics, so forth. Wonder Woman generally just has Wonder Woman. 2, it has to be considered a part of official DC Universe continuity at time of release. So something like the 2014 Sensation Comics or the digital-only Legends of Wonder Woman series doesn't count. One last thing, like I said earlier, Wonder Woman doesn't have the same amount of books as her contemporaries do. And unfortunately, a lot of these books are hard to come by and in some cases, out of print. In the description below, I'll have a list of the books I'm recommending, along with what issues comprise those books and whether or not they're part of a different collection. This way you might be able to find the books easier if you're looking through Comixology or if you're sifting through a back issue bin. So, without any further ado, let's begin. Number 5. Gale Simone's Wonder Woman run is often considered to be one of the best in the character's history, and is a highlight of her late 2000s era. When it comes to Simone's run, people will often recommend The Circle, her very first arc, and sometimes The Contagion, her last arc. I, however, will be recommending The Ends of the Earth, her second full arc. Ends of the Earth is about Wonder Woman being trapped in an alternate realm where she has to travel and fight her way back in order to defeat the demon Girth. And no, I'm not pronouncing that right. Now, at first glance, this might seem like a stereotypical Wonder Woman story, and for the most part it is, but there's just something a little extra to it that puts it above the rest. This is a Wonder Woman story as told as if it's a classic sword and sorcery style adventure. It's comparable to something like Conan the Barbarian. Hell, this can be seen as a precursor to Simone's Red Sonja run. Wonder Woman even teams up with characters like Claw the Unconquered, who is basically just Conan with a deformed hand, and Beowulf, like the Beowulf. It's just good old-fashioned sword and sorcery fun filled with a level of action and violence that we don't often associate with this character. And yet even through the violence, Wonder Woman's compassion and love shines through, reminding her and us of what kind of a great loving character she truly is. Plus, in the trade version, Wonder Woman tries to stop a movie of her life from being made, so for a comic that came out in 2008, it's pretty timely. Number 4. The 90s weren't the best time for Wonder Woman. They weren't the best time for comics, period, but Wonder Woman was one of the characters that was having a really hard time finding her voice in that decade. After George Perez left, the title was taken over by people who didn't really seem to have a good handle on the character. William Messner-Loebs was the primary writer of Wonder Woman for much of the first half of the decade, and while his run generally had a lot of ups and downs, he was able to put out a lot of good work when he was paired with artist Mike Deodato, specifically the stories The Contest and The Challenge of Artemis. The Contest is about how Queen Hippolyta has become dissatisfied with Diana's time as Wonder Woman, feeling that she's too preoccupied with being a superhero in man's world rather than preaching the Amazon way. Ultimately, she decides to have another contest to determine a new ambassador to the man's world, and spoiler alert, Diana doesn't win. The winner is a new character called Artemis, who's from a tribe of Amazons known as the Bana Mengal, who do not like those from Themyscira at all. The Challenge of Artemis is all about how Artemis handles becoming the new Wonder Woman, and how Diana handles not being Wonder Woman anymore. Now, this is a very similar story to Nightfall and the Death of Superman, where a legendary hero is replaced by a more 90s version. And this book is pretty 90s. Deodato's art is filled with big hulking monsters and impossibly dressed and proportioned women. I mean, this is the series that put Diana in this outfit. 90s. But even with the aesthetic, the art, and the outfit, what makes the series work is the same thing that made Nightfall work. It shows why Diana Prince is Wonder Woman, and anyone else you put in that costume just doesn't compare. And not only does this series introduce us to a great new character in Artemis and the Bana Bengal, but it also shows us more of the history of the Amazons and what makes Diana specifically so special. If you can get past the dated artwork, this is easily one of the most fun and fast-paced stories in the character's history, and for a 90s comic, it does hold up surprisingly well. It's not bogged down by overcomplicated plot devices and a lot of useless technobabble that plagued a lot of stories of that era. It just works straight through, no bullshit. Number 3. You know who doesn't get the recognition he deserves for writing Wonder Woman? Phil Jimenez. Whenever people mention the best Wonder Woman writers, they'll always bring up Greg Rucka, Gale Simone, George Perez, Brian Azzarello, maybe, and then Phil Jimenez if they ever get that far down the list. Which is a shame because more than anyone, Phil Jimenez did the most work to get Wonder Woman out of her 90s slump and back to the glory days of the George Perez era, and was able to set the stage for later writers like Greg Rucka and Gale Simone to run with the character. He took over the book with issue 164 and came right out the gate with a great 4-part series where Wonder Woman and Artemis team up with Batman and Huntress to stop some rogue gods from teaming up with the Joker, Poison Ivy, and Scarecrow from taking over Gotham City. But perhaps Phil Jimenez's best work with the character came with his follow-up story, Paradise Lost. In a nutshell, Paradise Lost is about the Amazon Civil War, but not just between the Amazons of Themyscira and Bana Bengal, but also between Diana and her mother Hippolyta. By this point, Hippolyta had been spending a lot of time away from the throne and acting as the Wonder Woman to the Justice Society, and to Diana, she feels like she's neglecting her people for superheroics. Kind of like a reverse of what Messner-Loebs was doing. Meanwhile, tensions between the Bana and Themyscirans reach breaking point when they're all tricked into just fighting each other. One of the reasons why this story is so great is because it's basically a full-scale event story that Phil Jimenez is able to tell in just 2 issues with nothing feeling left out. It presents Wonder Woman with the ultimate conflict. She's supposed to go to man's world and preach the peaceful ways of the Amazon, but how is she supposed to do that when her own people aren't practicing what they preach? And without spoiling anything, the ending of Paradise Lost is both shocking and heartbreaking and will wind up reshaping the Wonder Woman character for the next year of her comic. Now, both the Gotham story and Paradise Lost are collected in the trade Paradise Lost. It also contains a 1-issue story about Lois Lane interviewing Wonder Woman throughout the course of her day. It may just be the best single-issue story of the past 20 years. I should mention that Phil Jimenez followed up Paradise Lost with 2 other excellent stories, The Witch and the Warrior and Paradise Found. Both are collected in the trade Paradise Found. However, in between Paradise Lost and The Witch and the Warrior and Paradise Found was Wonder Woman's tie-in to the ongoing event of the era, Our Worlds at War. Our Worlds at War was not good, and Wonder Woman's tie-in to that event was also not good. But if you can just soldier through those 3 issues, because there is some important stuff that happens in those 3 issues, you will get to the satisfying conclusion of what Phil Jimenez started all the way back in Paradise Lost. Number 2. I was a big fan of DC's 1 year later jump after Infinite Crisis. It was sort of like DC Rebirth, but without all the Watchmen and metatextual stuff. In my Batman video, I recommended the Batman 1 year later story Face to Face. In my Superman video, I recommended the Superman 1 year later story Up, Up, and Away. For my Wonder Woman video, I'm going to recommend the Wonder Woman 1 year later story, Who is Wonder Woman? Following Infinite Crisis, Diana takes a year off from being Wonder Woman in order to rediscover exactly who she is and why she does what she does. In the meantime, she leaves the mantle of Wonder Woman in the hands of her sister and partner, Donna Troy. Diana does eventually return under her old alias Diana Prince and is now working for the Department of Metahuman Affairs. And now she must try to regain the trust of her old allies while simultaneously fighting pretty much her entire rogues gallery. Now, I'm putting this book rather high on my list, even though I know full well this is not a very loved book. A lot of people have a problem with how this set up Wonder Woman's status quo post-Infinite Crisis, specifically how now every time Wonder Woman gets out of her costume, she's human, she's mortal. Which, yes, it is a big deal, but you know what? It actually works here. And even though pretty much all of Wonder Woman's villains are in this story, it never once feels confusing. I was never once lost reading this book. It's a great first Wonder Woman story, a gateway book to bigger and better books. It gives people just the introduction they need, not just to Wonder Woman, but to her greater world at large, and not in the origin story sense, but in a modern setting sense. Also, Alan Heinberg, the writer of Who is Wonder Woman, is actually a credited writer on the Wonder Woman movie, so clearly DC trusts him with this character. And if nothing else, Terry and Rachel Dotson's artwork in this story is incredible. They are probably the best artists to ever draw Wonder Woman in the character's 75-year history. Number 1. I almost didn't put the Hiketeia by Greg Rucka and J.G. Jones on this list. It's actually fairly well known and has one of the most iconic covers of the early 2000s. But I'm putting it on this list for 2 reasons. One, the standalone book is currently out of print. If you wanted to read this right now, you'd have to go out and get the first volume of the Greg Rucka collection. And second, as time goes on, I feel like people are forgetting this story in favor of other Greg Rucka tales like Eyes of the Gorgon or his current Rebirth run. And while Greg Rucka may very well be the best Wonder Woman writer of all time, nothing he's done has compared to the Hiketeia. The story is about Wonder Woman protecting a young woman named Danielle from incarceration. Danielle was able to invoke the ancient ritual of Hiketeia, bonding Wonder Woman to Danielle to protect her at all costs, because to break Hiketeia would be to incur the wrath of the gods. However, Danielle is wanted for murder and is followed all the way from Gotham City by Batman. He wants to bring her to justice, but Wonder Woman will not break Hiketeia. She vowed to protect Danielle from all pursuers, and that's what she's going to do, even if that means protecting her from an old friend. This book, more than any other, to me really shows Diana's compassion and sense of justice better than anything else. It really shows her get to know and care about Danielle, and in turn, we do too. And by the time we find out why Danielle did what she did, we root for Diana to protect her that much more. And it does something that no other book has ever been able to do. It made Batman get on my nerves. You just want him to let this one go, but instead you have 2 people now with very strong senses of justice duking it out against each other for the fate of this one girl. It's something that you really don't see very often in monthly comics. Now, like I said before, this story is currently collected in the first volume of the Greg Rucka collection, which is full of great stuff. I freely admit that, and you should definitely check it out. However, if you ever see the Hiketeia on its own as a standalone book, buy it. Buy it immediately. This way you can read it on its own in its pure original version. And then when you're done, you can lend it to anyone you want so that they too can get the same experience of reading what is quite possibly the best Wonder Woman comic of all time. And there you have it, my list of the top 5 underrated Wonder Woman comics. Did I leave any out? I know I did. Let me know down below or anywhere on the internet. If you want more comic book recommendations, I have a playlist over here where I also recommend underrated Batman and Superman books. Be sure to do all the usual YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe, yada yada yada. And until next time, have a good week. Enjoy Wonder Woman.